I'm Joel Miller,
And I'm Jamie Bennett.
and this is Bad Books of the Bible.
It's a podcast about a collection of books with a curious pedigree and an even stranger legacy.
Okay, so last week, the top of the show was a little long, and we got, some complaints. But we're going to tighten it up this week so we can get back to the action. I just want to talk for a minute about the literary technique used in the book, because we've been saying from the beginning that this book, the book of Tobit, was kind of comical. Sure. It was comedic.
Right.
And so far, there's like death and misery and blindness.
Yeah, you and I are the only ones that have been laughing.
That's true.
Nobody's laughing in the story.
It's really true. Nobody's laughing. Well, okay, so let's actually chat about that for a quick second. You know, like when Saul Bellow introduced this book in his Jewish short stories, his collection, he talked about this book as being comedic, as being funny. There is a couple of devices that the narrator is using in order to bring out the humor, what humor there is. And I think, you know, the humor is actually for the reader, in the reader's experience. And let me just point out a couple things. One of them would be like irony. So, you know, Tobit, let's just say this real fast. If you have to explain a joke, maybe it's not funny. But here's how it works. Like irony, Tobit, you know, he gives advice to his son. Like, if you want to be successful, you got to do such and such, right? Yeah. Meanwhile, he's penniless and blind.
Right.
So, like, is it believable? Like, this is kind of like the way the humor is brought into the story. Mm-hmm. Saul Bellow actually mentions the dog as being like a part of the comedic side of this. It's just like one of those cute details. And details is actually another aspect of the kind of humor that the story brings. And here is an example. We just got done talking about, in the last episode, the fish, right?
Yeah.
This is a good example of what the author is using as kind of a comedic or a humorous device. And that is, they are not relying on suspense. You know, we've kind of like joked about spoilers throughout the shows so far. They're not spoilers. They're actually like, it's a technique. The author is giving you like these little inside tidbits of what's going to happen. So these little teases.
Yeah, right.
And the story doesn't rely on suspense like at all. It like literally tells you the entire story early on what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's like what the kids call the Easter eggs, right?
Right.
You know, it's a little hidden gem to find, to pay attention to get winked at a little bit.
So right, it's that kind of like that winking that is the humor. So the author is trying to essentially key you, the reader, into the action to come. And that way, when you see it happen, you're like, oh, look, that just happened. Oh, look, that just happened. Over and over again, right? So you get this kind of like these little teases and then the fulfillments.
Yeah, right.
So the reader is like clued in at every step to the action to come. And then there's like this sense of delight in watching it happen.
So we left Raphael and Tobias on a journey, and as they're approaching Ecbatana, Raphael takes him to a relative's house, and he tells Tobias that he's got a secret plan up his sleeve. So he says, we're going to stay with your relative Raguel, and he says that he has a daughter named Sarah.
Tobias, it turns out, is the next of kin of Sarah. And we've already met Sarah, right? Sarah is the woman who has had 7 husbands on the night of their wedding, murdered by the demon Asmodeus.
Yeah.
And she's the unlucky bride. There's like no woman more unlucky than Sarah. Tobias is next of kin. And we also talked about the need to like have family connections in these marriages for the sake of Jewish identity, right? That these are like identity markers. So
Marry a good Jewish girl, we said.
marry a good Jewish girl. And that's what Raphael is telling Tobias to do. So
Yeah.
he's got this plan up his sleeve. They're going to take this pit stop in Ecbatana, and he's going to hook them up. And so should Tobias need any encouragement, Raphael tells him, hey, she comes from a good family. She's got some inheritable possessions. And
That's helpful.
And what's more, and by the way, inheritable possessions for Tobias right now might be very attractive because he comes from a family that has nothing.
He's falling on hard times.
Hard times. And as if he needed any further encouragement, he mentions to him that she is sensible, brave, and very beautiful.
So she is beautiful, but there's more to it than that. And Raphael lays it out for him. He says in 6:13, now listen to my plan. I will speak to her father, and as soon as we return from Rajas, we will celebrate the marriage. For I know that Raguel, according to the law of Moses, cannot give her to another man without incurring the penalty of death, because you, rather than any other man, are entitled to her inheritance. So this is really interesting because he brings up this concept of a rule of Moses related to marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Does Tobias have a right to Sarah? Really this comes down to ancient Hebrew inheritance laws. We see in the book of Numbers, for example, this is probably where it's most famously laid out in scripture, where they're sorting out the inheritance situation for some daughters of Zelophehad. I can't even say that. Zelophehad.
That's pretty close.
No?
I like that.
How would you say it?
Zelophehad. I think we're going to have to do a special edition of us butchering names.
Just an entire 30-minute episode of butchered names.
Yep. The blood on the floor will be immense. Up to the bridles of the horses. to use a line from Revelation.
The carnage. It's too much. Zelophehad. All right, so let's get into this a little bit. Let's look at what Numbers actually says. In Numbers 36:8, it says, "And every daughter who possesses an inheritance in any tribe of the people of Israel." So notice this is all being laid out in terms of inheritance. Shall be wife to one of the clan of the tribe of her father, so that every one of the people of Israel may possess the inheritance of his fathers. So this idea of introducing kinship marriage was, we've got to remember in its context, this is a very patriarchal society. Things, the whole concept of feminism and women's rights and the things that a lot of moderns take for granted was so very foreign. But the need to protect rights and to take care of people was there in some sense. And so this idea of kinship marriage made it possible so that if a man died and left a widow, she could be taken care of. And specifically, the way that it provided for that would be if he had a brother, she would marry the brother. And then that could also provide opportunity to raise up heirs on behalf of the deceased man, the deceased husband. And so we have this kind of going on in the backdrop of this story, where Sarah has kind of been through a series of husbands, and she doesn't have one now. She's widowed yet again. And here is Raphael's plan. But you, Tobias, are the next of kin, and you are eligible to be the next husband.
So Raphael tells Tobias that, good family, good girl, good looking, good everything. And he has a claim to marry her. What he doesn't tell him is that there's a catch. That she's also plagued by a demon who has killed her 7 prior husbands.
Move over Henry VIII's 6 wives, because Sarah had 7 husbands.
7, count them. And it turns out, by the way, that Tobias has heard, okay, this has gotten around. So we mentioned at the beginning that there's no way a woman could have 7 husbands, all of whom die on their wedding night, murdered ostensibly by a nefarious supernatural force, without word getting around. And sure enough, Tobias is like, wait a minute. You mean that girl? Heck no. He says, I have heard that she's already been married to 7 husbands and that they died in the bridal chamber. On the night when they went into her, they would die. I have heard people saying that it was a demon that killed them. It does no harm to her, but it kills anyone who desires to approach her. So now, since I'm the only son my father has, I'm afraid that I may die and bring my father's and mother's life down to their grave, grieving for me, and they will have no other son to bury them.
I love that he's thinking of his parents.
You know? Right. Not that I'm going to get killed, but nobody's going to be left to take care of mom and dad.
I mean, who wouldn't be sympathetic to this? You don't want to make mom and dad sad. You got to take care of them. Of course, we don't want you to be dead husband number 8.
No, I mean, and statistics would tell you that you don't stand a good shot, Yeah.
So
far, this girl is 7 for 7.
So Raphael connects the dots for him. And he basically reminds him that his father said to marry a good Jewish girl. He also says not to worry about the demon. He says you can marry her, marry the girl, and when you go into the bridal chamber, you've got some tools to deal with it. Specifically, you've got fish liver and fish heart. And he basically lays it out. He says to burn it like incense and that this is going to drive the demon away. To quote him, he says, now when you are about to go to bed with her, both of you must first stand up and pray, imploring the Lord of heaven that mercy and safety be granted to you. Do not be afraid. That's a famous thing that angels love to say. Do not be afraid, for she was set apart for you before the world was made. You will save her, and she will go to you. So, despite the fear of going to battle with a demon, apparently the pep talk was effective because he warms up to the idea of having Sarah as his wife.
The way he's warmed up to the idea, despite the fact that it tells you he's warmed up to the idea, is he's pretty hot to trot. They hit Ecbatana, and the very first thing Tobias says is...
Straight away.
Get me to that girl's house.
Lorraine, I am your density.
and right. They make it to Ecbatana, and they go straight to Raguel's house, Sarah's house. And Tobias reminds Raguel of Tobit. Like, they see him, and they're like, don't I know you? You are super familiar. And, of course, Tobias looks like his dad, and that sparks some conversation. And it turns out that they know Tobit. And they say, do you know our kinsman Tobit? In fact, that question is asked by Edna, who is Raguel's wife. And Tobias says, yeah, he's my dad. And he lets him know that Tobias is in good health. That seems a little odd because, he's not. He
didn't want to bum him out away,
Yep. But, he's in terrible health, and that's fine. Raguel already knows that Tobias is blind. So, there's, despite the distance, 400 miles between these two cities, there's already conversation. Word's gotten back to Tobias that there's this really unlucky girl named Sarah that eventually he's going to want to marry. And the other direction, the bad news from Nineveh has come to them that Tobias... their family member has been stricken blind and has been, dealt a terrible blow.
Yeah, and it says that they must have clearly had some love for their family because it says that, everybody cried. Everybody was upset. Everybody was worried about Tobit and all of that. But this is, once you essentially have a family reunion.
Yep.
That's when Sarah's marital status comes into play. Tobias really wants to make a move. He he's sold on the idea, and Raguel informs him of the situation, brings him up to speed, and says, "Hey, this is you need to know what's been going on." And he says bluntly, "I've given her to 7 men of our kinsmen, and all died on the night when they went into her." But nonetheless, Tobias was insistent that he understood, and they went ahead and they moved ahead with the courtship. In fact, it was a pretty quick courtship. They basically got things moving before the appetizers even hit the table. He says, "Sure, yeah, Sarah can be your wife." And quote, he says, "In accordance with the decree in the book of Moses, she is given to you from today and forever. May the Lord of heaven, my child, guide and prosper you both this night and grant you mercy and peace." They pull out the scrolls, they sign the papers, and they basically start making the arrangements for the marriage to happen. And then they went ahead and broke out the good silver and and the wine, and they ate and drank. They had a great evening celebrating.
It's because of this connection to marriage, of this connection to this wedding that's getting ready to happen, that this book ends up getting used in various churches' wedding ceremonies. So, for instance, we mentioned earlier in another episode that the Book of Tobit, part of it is an optional reading in the Anglican wedding service, and it's used, as a way of celebrating marriages, as a way of celebrating weddings in a variety of contexts. So, that's where a lot of people run into it, but they don't run into it in their Bible because they happen to have a copy that doesn't have these or any of the other deuterocanonical or so-called apocryphal books. So let's just chat maybe for the rest of this episode about where are some places people can get these books, because we're hearing from people saying where do I even find this stuff?
Yeah. No, and I'm glad we're taking the time to talk about this, because you and I have both over the years, after discovering these books and coming to appreciate them, we've each acquired various copies of them, either as standalone volumes or incorporated within the rest of Scripture. Mm-hmm. And I just happened to get 2 copies of the Bible, the identical translation but different formats, that contain most of the books we're talking about. And I'm really thoroughly enjoying them and would love to be able to share them. So one was for my birthday. I received the English Standard Version, the ESV, in the Catholic edition. Mm-hmm. And there's a number of them out there, but the 2 that I got, one is just straight up a leather Bible. It's just the text. There's nothing else. And it says ESV Catholic edition. I think the Augustine Institute publishes it. And then there's also a similar volume, same text, except it's arranged for a Bible in the year. So it puts a couple of chapters from the Old Testament, a couple from the New, all together, and then you just read through it slowly over a year. Now, I'm not trying to do the 365-day thing, but I am trying to go sequentially through it with my wife. Mm-hmm. And she's been reading along in her Russian copy of the Scriptures, and she's reading the same text. Now, why do I like the ESV so much? I mean, I just think it's a very readable text. Mm-hmm. It comes from a line of translations going back to the King James Version, but that have been modified and updated for the language to be way more accessible. And so I really like the ESV edition, because it mm-hmm. I think for modern readers, they can get into it pretty easily. But there are others out there. I managed to find a large print King James Version Apocrypha on Amazon for my mom, because she's been listening into these and doesn't have her copy anymore of the Apocrypha. So I sent her the large print, but I could only find the large print King James. Mm-hmm. But there's others out there. I mean, the one-stop shop that I really like for introducing people to these books is just telling them, get the Orthodox Study Bible. Mm-hmm. It's a fantastic text. It has the Old Testament books according to the Septuagint. It has some nice little study notes. This is one you can just get it over with. Just pick up this book. It's got everything in there that you'll need for this. There are also some copies, like I mentioned, the large print of just the Apocrypha. You can get just the text. If our listeners have a Bible that has 66 books and they want to just simply pick up a copy of these, they're out there. You and I both have copies of the Jewish annotated Apocrypha. Mm-hmm. That's in the New Revised Standard Version. It has some very helpful study notes. There's also a Lutheran edition that came out. It's a companion to their study Bible. Mm-hmm. And that has some helpful study notes. Now, of course, it's, from a specifically Lutheran perspective, just like the Jewish annotated Apocryphas from a Jewish perspective. Mm-hmm. And of course, another place that some people may be interested in, there's a wonderful set of commentaries from the early church fathers. InterVarsity Press has published it, and they have the entire text in there, followed by commentary from various early church fathers. Mm-hmm. So I think those are all very helpful additions. Of course, if someone just wants to simply go down to a used bookstore, you can find Catholic Bibles, you can find Anglican Bibles. The library is going to have it. The internet has it. I found an NRSV with the annotated, that's annotated with the Apocrypha at a used bookstore years ago. Comes in handy. So I highly recommend getting a copy, because it's one thing to listen to us talk about it, but it's another to dig into the text yourself as well.
We will have, by the way, links for all of these resources that we've just mentioned in the episode guide. And this is the point of the show where I mention you can get that at badbooksofthebible.com. Every week we publish a episode guide that has resources, background information on what we've been talking about, and all of these resources and some others will be listed there for you.
I'm Jamie Bennett.
And I'm Joel Miller.
And you've been listening to Bad Books of the Bible,
a production of Ancient Faith Radio. Come back next week when we get a sneak peek at an exorcism.